Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us live on WDTN's Facebook page. Hope you all just finished watching our special newscast on the opioid crisis here in Dayton and across Ohio. We're going to be continuing the discussion here on Facebook Live. Join with me is a great panel of guest speakers. Start by introducing everyone. We have Jim Wahlberg. He is the executive director of the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation. We have Jason Schumacher. He works for the DEA. He's an assistant special agent in charge. And we have Jan Lepore-Jenelson. She is the executive director of WestCare Ohio, and she also works with East End Community Services here in Dayton. And then we also have Gail Daffler, who works with Goodwill, Easter Seals of the Miami Valley. Thank you all so much for joining us today, this evening, I should say, and for being a part of this whole just presentation, trying to bring awareness about the opioid crisis and how far we've come and how much work is still left to be done here in Dayton. So we're going to start off with Jim Wahlberg. Jim, the Wahlberg Foundation has been really helpful with helping us through this special presentation here in Dayton. You've made a personal commitment to fighting the opioid epidemic. Why did you decide to get involved in this?
It's my favorite question. And it's one that kind of confuses me sometimes. And I answer it the same way all the time. Why not? Right? Although it is very personal to me, I am a person in long-term recovery, and I have lost many people that I've known over the years to addiction. But, you know, anything that takes this many people, right? And it's really a why not situation. Why are we not all involved in the conversation? Why are we not all standing up and being counted? You know, it's been, 10 years of solid carnage, right? Solid carnage, sadness and loss for families. So we're here to do all that we can, and we want to be part of this conversation.
And can you also just go into a little bit about what the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation does?
Sure. So the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation is, we're just that. We're a charitable organization. We raise and distribute funds to programs that serve inner city kids. For us, we grew up sort of receiving the kindness of strangers, if you will. We all belong to one community organization or another with 9 kids in my family. So when it came time and we started to experience some success in life, we didn't have to look to foreign shores or way off in the distance to know what we wanted to do and how we wanted to contribute. We just had to look at the neighborhood we grew up in, right? And so that's what we've done. And you know, I want to say one thing before we go much further, and that is that this epidemic is front page news now, right? And when I was growing up, and people that are people of color, people of lower economic standing, were dying at an alarming rate, and there was no outrage. There was no candlelight vigil. There was no march. There was no nothing. So I always feel obligated to mention those folks, right? Because their life was worth just as much as anybody else's life. But we now have an army of people across the country who are out there fighting for change, and I'm honored to stand with them.
You do incredible work. And during our special, you said something too, that we really need to be talking to our kids and educating our youth about this crisis. How can parents kind of start that conversations, parents and guardians start that conversations with their kids kind of at a young age to let them know that this is happening in their community?
Well, this would have been a great segue for people, right? So our events are, the purpose of what I do, my life's work, is to start a conversation, right? To get kids and parents talking to each other. So this would have been a great tool, right? And tools like this are great tools because, you know, I am a parent. I know that these conversations are tough. They're hard. We feel like if we start this conversation, we might be pointing them in a direction because they weren't aware of it, right? But kids are aware of it. When we do these events live, we have 10,000 kids in an arena, and I ask the kids that have lost somebody they love to an opioid overdose to stand up. It ranges from 50 to 85% of the room, and we're talking 10,000 kids. I didn't know anybody that died from an overdose until I was an adult in state prison, right? This is a traumatic and devastating thing that our young people are living through. And we're talking about junior high school kids here. We're not talking about 19 and 20-year-olds. We're talking about little kids that are experiencing this traumatic loss. So I don't think there's any age too young to start talking about this conversation. And it could start with your medicine cabinet, right? Open your medicine cabinet, start to take things out. I'm going to take this out. I'm going to dispose of this safely because it's dangerous to your health, right? That's a nice way to start a conversation. But it's, being a parent, too many parents, I think, don't know the word no. They're eager to be their kids' friends. And, my job is to raise good young people and to try to point them in the right direction. So I need to do pointing. I need to point a lot, and I need to show them by example.
I think something too is teaching kids about compassion, because I don't think people realize that drug addiction affects so many people and so many families, and you don't even realize who is struggling with addiction in your community. So just teaching kids, not to judge.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. The stigma of this epidemic has crushed so many people. There's so many families, moms and dads, wandering around aimlessly, and people won't talk to them because they think it's somehow contagious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you just never know what kind of conversation can actually help that person.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. We will get back to you in a little. We're going to switch gears now to talk about the law enforcement side of this crisis. Joining us is Jason Schumacher, again, the Assistant Special Agent in charge with the DEA. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Jason. So to start off, the DEA does a lot in prevention and education. I don't know if a lot of people know about that. So can you just talk about those education and prevention programs and tell us more about the initiatives that the DEA is spearheading?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. So the prevention and education it's a significant role in what we do. The DEA sort of has a three-pronged approach to this problem, and what we've done is the first prong being the law enforcement side. So we definitely, daily we work with our state and local counterparts. We share intelligence. We, be sure that we're working the right type of targets in the high profile trafficking organizations. Secondly, we work with the diversion side. So we work hard at educating and engage with pharmacies and doctors to ensure that they're, the prescriptions are being prescribed properly. And as you said, lastly is the education part, and that's an important part. We have several programs that we do, everything from the National Pill Take Back Day and what was spoken of earlier, the medicine cabinet. So, in just 1 week, we work with our state and locals, and we've got stations set up at the PDs, police departments, where you can bring those unused pills to the police departments and dispose of them. Because that's what kids are, sometimes is their first experiences when they see those pills in the medicine cabinets in our own home. We also have partnered with Discovery Education. We've got an online program. It's operationprevention.com, where children can go to that website and learn about how to talk to your kids about drugs and the different effects that they have on families. And they're hard conversations, but this is a tool that we've partnered with, and it's something that people need to do. Other campaigns are the One Pill Can Kill, which is been a significant problem for everyone in this country. When 93,000 people are dying in 2020, that's almost 255 people a day. So those are just a few that the DEA has and are very important to us.
All great initiatives. So what is law enforcement finding in terms of criminal activity when it comes to selling and distributing opioids? Where are these pills coming from?
Well, so the biggest increase that we've seen lately is the counterfeit pills, and it's very alarming. We've identified just this past year we seized 9.6 million counterfeit pills, and in 2020 that's more than the couple years prior together. So what's most alarming and concerning with these counterfeit pills is they look identical to a prescription pill that you might get from a doctor. So these young adults, kids, they think that they're just buying one Xanax or one Percocet or Adderall, but 42% of these pills, 2 out of 5 of these pills contain a lethal dose of fentanyl. And a lot of people ask, just what is a lethal dose? That's 2 milligrams. So you can imagine at the tip of a pencil, you could put 2 milligrams of fentanyl. So it's deadly, it's alarming, it's concerning, and what we want to do in this program has been a great part of just bringing awareness to the community.
And how big is the counterfeit pill problem here in Dayton?
Well, it's on the rise. It's definitely significant. I can tell you from our personal experience with the folks that we work in the state and local and DEA, we seized enough fentanyl this year that would kill the entire population of Ohio. So 1 kilogram of fentanyl can kill it's a potential to kill 500,000 people.
Wow, that is shocking.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We will come back to you to talk more about law enforcement officers just being on the front lines of this epidemic. We're going to move on now to Jan Lepore Jentelson. She is the Executive Director of WestCare Ohio and works with East End Community Services here in Dayton. I do also want to say for those joining us now live on WDTN's Facebook page, you can also get in on this discussion. You can ask questions. If you have any questions for the guest speakers, they'll be happy to answer your questions. I'm monitoring Facebook in the comments now as well. So Jan, thank you so much for being here with us tonight. So can you just start off by telling us a little bit about what WestCare is?
Well, WestCare is the legal name of East End Community Services, so we're one organization. And we've been in Dayton, in the inner east side of Dayton for 24 years, working to break the cycle of poverty. So we do a lot around education, job connecting, work with seniors who are really struggling. And back in 2013, we realized that there was a growing opioid problem in inner east Dayton. And we realized early on that it was affecting families and there was a lot of suffering associated with it. Excuse me. So we started getting involved, and we worked with Dayton Police to bring up the GROW team that was highlighted in the hour before this, and it was getting so bad that the police would go out, and then some of our staff would join with Wendy Jackson from the DEA and walk the streets and find people who were addicted and pull them in off the street, would administer Narcan in the event that there was an overdose, and just tried to stop the bleeding, if you will. We then realized that children really needed education. We were already in Dayton Public Schools, and we recognized that children needed certain skills to prevent future drug addiction. Like they needed to know how to calm themselves, how to regulate their own behaviors, and just know about drugs in general. But children already knew about drugs. They were living with relatives who are and were addicted. So while we do a lot of prevention education and help children learn how to make good choices, the other thing we started to do was this program called Camp Mariposa, which is a national model. And what we do is every other month, we bring children to a weekend camp. And these are children who are of addiction. They have either lost somebody to addiction or lived with someone who's been addicted. And these kids are really stressed. They're really struggling. And we know that a child who experiences drug addiction that close up and personal for any kind of prolonged period of time is far more likely to become a drug user before they hit 20. And then that cycle just perpetuates itself. So we've learned that drug addiction can be transmitted generationally. So the goal is to break that cycle. So by taking kids away to these camps, and they can go starting at age 9 through age 12, because that's the period of time when, right before they start experimenting, we help them develop the same kind of skills we develop in the schoolroom with them, the classroom, but they recognize that they're not alone, that other kids have experienced the same kind of drug addiction that they've seen, and that it's not their fate to go that direction, to become addicted to drugs. So it's a wonderful program. Kids come in with no goals, they're despondent, they're depressed, and by the time the program is over, they have goals for their future, and they're ready to take on the world. And then you saw in the video, or the presentation an hour ago, we do a lot with peer support, because we know that people who are struggling really need a helping hand, and our peer supporters are able to help folks get connected to treatment. And then on the other side of treatment, we can help them get involved in long-term recovery and make sure they have that supportive community around them to help them recover and get their lives back.
That sounds like an amazing program you have there. And as we've said before, this is an issue that impacts families, communities all over the country, here in Dayton and Ohio. What can we do as a community to help end the stigma of this disease so people aren't afraid or don't feel bad about getting the support they need?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to recognize is, as was said earlier, we're not going to arrest our way out of this. This is not about criminality. This is a public health crisis. And we have to recognize people who are addicted to drugs are ill. It's a disease. And maybe through no fault of their own, we've all heard about how people can get addicted. It's important to be open-minded and recognize these are people's sons and daughters and brothers and sisters, and they're suffering and they need our help. Not to be disdained, but to get the help that they need. And to Jim's point, it's everybody's responsibility to do that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jan. Moving on now to Gail Daffler, who works with Goodwill Easter Seals in Miami Valley. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Gail. So can you just go into a little bit about your role with Goodwill and what Goodwill does in prevention recovery?
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm the prevention coordinator at Goodwill Easter Seals Miami Valley. So I'll talk a little bit about our prevention team. We go into community spaces, whether it's schools, community centers, and we help to educate our young people all the way up to our older adults about best practices with medication safety. What I love what Jim said was talking about making sure that we secure our medications, as well as making sure as we dispose our medications in a safe way so that our homes aren't a place of access for misuse. So taking this, we talk about all of the things that we can do to be safer around medications. One thing that our data has shown is that somebody might get medication and misuse it from a friend or a family member, somebody that you know. It's not like, say, somebody that's a stranger. And that happens over 50% of the time. So we want to make sure our homes are a place that is as safe as possible. So and we also work with our East End Community Services, and we help out with Camp Mariposa. So Jan, I was so glad that you talked about that because it's such a valuable service. It uplifts the children, it connects them, and it's just a really fantastic service that's so valued in our community.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh, you're welcome. We also have peer services at Goodwill Easter Seals. And that's something where, anybody can come in if they just want to walk in to our lobby and say, I need help. They can during our office hours. I don't know, they might not know where to start, but that's a great place they can start. There's so many great avenues in our community to start at. So I do want to welcome anybody who wants to start off and talk to one of our peers, somebody who's had a lived experience, somebody who has a caring and compassionate ear, and can connect to great services. That's something, please stop by our offices at Goodwill Easter Seals. We can definitely do that. We also have behavioral health services on hand. So, working with our families, our loved ones, and helping them to get the services that they deserve.
And how important is it for people going through recovery to have a place like Goodwill Easter Seals to help them get back on their feet?
Absolutely, great question. When I think about somebody who's in recovery, there could be multiple supports that somebody might need. Maybe it's just, it might look different for each person too. So, and that's something where, with our teams that we all work with, there's different support groups available. There's employment opportunities, services to help out with that. But also just the education, that support, that compassion that you can get from multiple places in Montgomery County. That's what I love about working here. There's lots of different avenues somebody can take. And so that's something where there's lots of compassion and support. And so that's with Goodwill, we're here to help out. I know Easton Community Services is too. There's lots of different places that can assist a family.
Sounds like a lot of great resources for people who are struggling here in Dayton. Thank you so much. Jim, a question for you too. You've worked with a lot of families who have lost loved ones due to substance abuse. What do you have to say to those families who are trying to manage that loss? I think you're muted, Jim.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's much that you can say. I can tell you this. I can tell you that these families have suffered greatly, right? And will continue to suffer and will continue to miss their loved one that is gone, right? But what many of them have told me is that they welcome you to come and ask them questions about their loved one, right? Particularly their children, right? Because what happens is that it ends up that their child was a drug addict and their child died of a drug overdose, right? And their child ends up becoming nothing more than that if they let that happen, right? Mm-hmm. So you are not gonna remind them of their child because they're never gonna forget their child, right? You're not gonna cause them pain by speaking to them, but it's important to them, to many that I know, and I know like 1,000 across the country, is that they want to tell you about their child. They want to tell you that they were more than a person with suffering from addiction, that they were a brother or a sister or a nephew or a student or an employee. They want to tell you more about them as a human being and as a person, and how in most cases they were kind and loving people, right? So, I don't really, to me, it's scary to think that I have advice for somebody who's going through something like that, right? I can't imagine it. It's the most devastating thing one can go through. But I know this, is that we can't do any of this alone, right? And that we need to be loving each other. We need to be taking care of each other. We need to be kind to each other. This stigma that people are dealing with, right? That, people are avoiding them in the supermarket because their child died from an overdose. It devastates me, and it devastates them, right? This is not about finger pointing. This is not about blame. This is not about shame. This is about loss. This is about brokenheartedness. And this is also about the greatest warriors that I have known are people that have lost their loved ones to this epidemic, right? I made a film called If Only, which when we do our in-person events, that event is wrapped around that film, right? I've never shown that film once in 7 years without family members there that have lost somebody to speak, because their story is the most important, most impactful story. But I've never struggled to find a parent to come out and speak and share their experience and their loss and their pain, because it's critical and they know it. These people their efforts are Herculean, and they're tireless in their goal to reach other families, and so that other families don't have to experience the loss and devastation that they have experienced.
Yeah, it's incredible work. Thank you so much. And Jason, going back to law enforcement, in the special, you and the other law enforcement officers here in Dayton kind of talked about putting an emphasis on mental health. Why is it important to put an emphasis on mental health when we are talking about the opioid epidemic?
Well, drugs are an escape, right? I mean, I think that's why people use drugs, is to escape reality, and it makes them feel good, and it's a short-term fix, right? But in the end, so I think we do have to focus and look at the mental health aspect of things as well.
Yes. And Jan, our last question here tonight. The COVID-19 pandemic has been hard for everyone, especially those who are going through recovery, those who are struggling with substance abuse. What can you tell people who are struggling right now with the isolation? Where can they go for help?
Well, of course, it's a huge problem. But at East End Community Services, like at Goodwill, Easter Seals, we're open 5 days a week. And if you're struggling and don't know where to start, you come to us. We will match you up with a peer supporter who will talk with you and help you sort out if you're ready for treatment. And then we go into action. We have a whole network, as I know Gail does, and that you do your own treatment. But we don't do the treatment. We connect people to the treatment that seems right for them at the time. And then we promise, and we are there at the end of that treatment to work with them to help them get up on their feet and stay up on their feet and regain their lives. So you can't give up hope. And there are resources available. So we're available, Gail's available. 115 is another resource where it's a little bit hard. I don't know how to get in there, but there are places that will help. And that's the wonderful thing about our community, to Gail's point. Everybody works together. There's no fighting over clients. If we've got somebody who's in need of help, we will all move heaven and earth to get them a bed in a treatment facility. So don't be afraid, but you've got to take the first step, because we can't want it more than you want it. You've got to be ready. And when you're ready, that's the time everybody will jump into action and help you.
Well, thank you so much. Amazing work being done here in Dayton and across the country. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight for this discussion. Thank you for everyone who tuned into Facebook as well to listen. You can also catch our special. If you didn't get to catch it tonight, you can watch it over on our website, WDTN.com. Thank you again, all of our guest speakers, for being here. Have a great night, everyone.